We'll still wait for some time before we start the session for which I gave you the hint before the break. We are now going to start with the panel discussion. In today's age, the attention span of the customers is probably the lowest. They are extremely savvy and their needs are ever changing, and they don't even bat a lid to switch the suppliers because they are highly empowered. And that's the topic for the panel discussion that we have now, which is about winning over the empowered, savvy, and the fickle customers. Now let's get some of the best minds in the industry together on the stage and gear up for a sparkling panel discussion. They are here to bring up together the ingredients and the recipe for winning over the empowered, savvy, and the fickle customer. Please welcome on stage Shilpa Sawant Mhatre, Head of Consumer and Technical Insights, Marico Limited. Mr. Shiv Kumar, Deputy GM, Head of Data Sciences, Mahindra and Mahindra. Where is our brand ambassador? He's gone. Okay, we really need to hear the claps which are louder, yeah? Krushnakant Sinojia, Head of Innovation at Crompton Greaves Consumer Electricals. And Mr. Samar Singh Sheikhawat, CMO of United Breweries Limited. Samar? Yes. And all of them are going to be moderated by Mudit Bhatnagar, Chief Brand Architect and CEO, Group Edge Brand and Media Managers, India. Mudit, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. So I'll take the center stage for a change. Yeah.
We have enough chair?
Yeah, we got it. Come on.
Okay, hi, thank you. That was quite a stellar introduction. Well, I have two dignitaries on my left, and I have stellar star performers on my right, and I'm by no means, a thought-provoking person. Of course, I'm going to pick their brains to bring this topic alive. So thank you so much for joining us. Quick introduction, I'm a hardcore brick and mortar retail guy, so I don't understand all these things that they speak about. And I'm going to find my answers through the four people over here. So quickly, a very interesting subject, spoken about, written about a lot in the recent past, current times as well. And of course, we're lucky to have these panelists who come from four different, very diverse verticals. Okay, and customer centricity is the key word these days. Everybody's been talking about it. And our intention in the next 30 minutes to 40 minutes time is going to be, how do we bring this thing alive, and how do we, each one of us, bring it out in our day-to-day working when it comes to diverse set of customers. So Shilpa, I'm going to start with you. Ladies first, of course. No, I would want to stick to the rules. Some things are not to be changed. Change is always good, but let's start with ladies first. So your take on it. How I'm going to do is I'm going to just take a prelude from each one of you, and then I'm going to get into brass tacks and get into some basic questions. So Shilpa, you please.
Yeah. So two words which kind of stayed in my mind when I was to come for this session is this fickle-minded and empowered consumer. And I, my domain and my work involves working with a category which I'm sure each one of you definitely would not find it very exciting, and that is oils. Yeah. So they are the edible oils for the brand Saffola, and of course the coconut oil for Parachute. And Nihar, the flagship brands of my organization. And I don't think many of you would agree in this room that oil as a format is very exciting from a beauty point, yeah. And the challenge to me, therefore, is how do I create this format into a beauty code for this fickle-minded and empowered consumer of today's time. But one thing I can definitely say is, while we say this oil is a format which seems to be so deeply culturally rooted and old, yet the fact that we are still doing so good as far as the business is concerned, and I definitely see the relevance of it, because you go to any fancy salon of today's world, there is still service which mentions about head massage, right? And the fact that it still exists in the topmost of the salon and the topmost of the spas, that really brings hope, and that really, feels that no, while the consumer might be fickle-minded and empowered, still there's something that can work with this, and that's really is the inciting challenge and makes things very exciting.
Fickle-minded, empowered. How does this thing go down well in your business, Samar, when it comes to breweries and it comes to the brands that you represent? So we spoke about experience. So what do you foresee and what do you really face on a daily basis?
So the challenge for me is to say something that I haven't said this morning to the audience. And so I have a favorite saying that consumers are no longer loyal to brands. Brands have to be loyal to consumers. So if you turn it around on its head, it has sort of very different implications. Fickle, by definition, is a negative word. What we like to say is that, and we saw the chief guest talking about a repertoire that exists in everyone's lives. The thing about marketers and brands is that the consumer is always ahead of you. You're always playing catch up. Only once in a generation or a lifetime does a person like Steve Jobs, maybe an Elon Musk, come along where he or she can actually predict what consumers want before they actually know themselves. Most often we're struggling to catch up with consumers. So repertoire actually existed even before it became a fashionable word. Growing up, we would only have maybe a white shirt and a blue shirt, but you're already buying several pairs of shoes, several watches, different colors of trousers, different clothing for the occasion, for the weather, for the company, etc. And today, repertoire is the term that marketers and researchers have given to that. Binda here will tell you that the same person who watches Jab Harry Met Sejal also goes and watches Bahubali, also watches Avengers Infinity War. And they're also watching in cinema halls. They're also watching on their phone. They're also watching on, Netflix or Amazon, etc. So there's a profusion, there's an explosion of content of every kind, accessed on a variety of platforms, accessible on a variety of platforms, and actually accessed through a variety of devices. Now this consumer is just consuming much more. He talked about consumer penetration. The challenge for us in the beer business is just to get more consumers to drink. Not the same consumer to drink more often, because that is just not going to happen. And he was talking about beer penetration a little earlier in the day. We have a nation of 1.3 billion, of which about 600 million are below the poverty line. They basically have no food to eat. Of the balance 700 million, anyone give me a guess of the total number of alcohol consumers in this country? Question one. Second question, the total number of beer consumers in this country. And whoever gets it right, I will give a year of free Kingfisher to that person.
Any hints?
So 1,300 million is our population, right? 1.3 billion. Total alcohol consumers in the country of any kind of alcohol, including illicit liquor, country spirits, for the people from the north, tharra, desi sharab, beer, anything, 200 million. And beer, only 100 million. For a country, now there are massive enablers, to your point of fickle consumers. We're a hot country. We have 3 weathers, 3 seasons, hot, hotter, hottest. Right, that's our season. We have the world's largest youth population, 600 million consumers below the age of 30 or 35. 2 massive enablers for beer. Yet the size of our industry is only 300 million. Because the beer consumption habit itself is really, really small. His earlier point on penetration. Now within this, they have this repertoire. I have some 55% market share, but the entire size of the pie is so small. And it just complicates it. Like I said to you, I will show you consumers who drink strong beer, mild beer, rum, vodka, mixing, depending on the occasion, the budget, the ambience, their mood. And we have to map all that in an industry where you're not allowed to do research, you're not allowed advertising, you're not allowed sampling. So this is a reality, repertoire, fickle consumers. I say that consumers cannot be loyal to brands. Brands have to be loyal to consumers.
So I always say this, that we live in a country which is heterogeneously homogeneous. The number of states, each state is equivalent to a country, and each city is equivalent to a state, and each district is equivalent to a city, and so on and so forth. So what you said, Samar, is very pertinent, that the consumption patterns, while there are climatic and social factors to it as well, but the consumption patterns, I think, differs from pin code to pin code as well. If we go down to that granular level, we were discussing about what Mahindra does, but I'll come to you last. I'm very keen to understand from KK that how does all these things, matter to his business, and how does he kind of look at things from a Crompton Greaves perspective when it comes to fickle-minded consumers?
Yeah, so basically, there is no right or a wrong answer. He was mentioning just a little while ago that, it's and. There is going to be a traditional consumer for any and every product, you name it, or service. And then there is going to be a new digital consumer or a phygital, who is just moving to a digital from a physical space. So those two consumer will exist, simultaneously. You need to look at both of them when you create products. When I come from a appliances industry, and it's no different than what he spoke about beer, or he spoke about edible oil. It's the same consumer, who buys edible oil and consumes beer. Same consumer goes and purchases appliances for his or her home. So I would say, it needs to be kept very, very simple. I look at it, in my own experience, my wife and my daughter, two different consumer. One belongs to traditional set of consumer, or slightly a digital, and then the second one, my daughter, is purely a digital consumer. So I need not go and step out of my home to understand this two consumer, and that's what I would suggest each one of us to make it simple. The organization moment. He spoke about profusion, and we need to take it as a profusion and not as a confusion. It's actually gamut of things you can do, and it's a journey or a transformation. It's not going to be any right or a correct answer. It will be point at a time, and it will be very different. It's difficult, but if you keep it simple, it will become much more enjoyable, much more fun, and you will touch that end consumer who is empowered and fickle. That's reality, and we need to accept that while we go along this way.
So what I pick from you is that and this is my inference from you just said, is that gone are the days of the lead decision maker in the family. When somebody would be the lead decision maker here, this is what we're going to kind of buy, this is what we're going to consume. Considering that we have well-informed customers and consumers both. People have access to devices, people have access to information. You kind of, while people would say, hey, Mahindra and Mahindra, Thar days, but then there's much more to the brand and the experience, I would say experience that you bring onto the road. Considering that we live in a country which is, like, as I said, heterogeneously homogeneous, we spoke about changing in consumer taste, behavior. We spoke about not one single decision maker in the family. What's your take on this, Shiv?
Sure, Mudit. So,
okay, you have a mic. Wonderful.
So again, this is a debate, and in my current role, definitely my role goes into understanding the car consumer, like having the automotive, and you can say that mostly towards the sports utility vehicles, and then understanding the customers who want to buy tractors, and then understanding the customers who are our agriculture facing business, which is auto, farm and agriculture is our 2/3 of the business across the group, we can say that, which is around $13 billion out of $19 billion we are treating with. So it is pretty diversified, and when we try to design a product, imagine that what you need in today's time when the customer is empowered with the information, with just on a phone or the internet, they can know anything or everything what the other products and the competitors are offering. So in this scenario, now it becomes a kind of your given task that you need to understand that how you're going to decode the need of the today's time. So to try that, we are trying to understand the customer. So now if you go to any of the dealership, just to enter your PIN code, the way we say that the PIN code defines the consumption pattern, you enter your age and the profession type, the algorithm will tell the sales consultant that what is the prioritization probability of the customer to buy the product. So imagine that we are trying to translate the customer's choice into our preference to offer whatever they are looking for, and try to understand in the scenario where the urban and the rural divide is closing down, then the taste is going to change. Now you try to understand when there was a time when we were selling around 9,000 boleros, but now it is around 2/3. What's the reason for this? Again, you can say that the urbanization is taking place. Now we are not just looking on the sturdiness of the car, but we are also looking on the style and the look. So no doubt the change and the taste is coming to different level now. And to answer that, we have to have now the command and control, whatever the digital footprints the people are living into the eco-space. And my role as a data scientist, so before joining Mahindra and Mahindra, I work for the banks and the insurance companies and the lot of telecommunication companies, but in my new role, it is completely a new geography to understand. And here, India is not even less complex than US. When I say that, means in US, I experienced the scenario where I was buying a product, electronic product, and they quoted me the price. I said that, hey, on the website, I can see a price is lower than this. They said that, fine, we have a counter, we can have a conversation, and we can bring down whatever the offer you are getting. So imagine that now the convergence is coming. Imagine the old days where you will not have the access to the many doors. Now at a time, I'm accessing the 5 stores. So to meet that, definitely the science and the technology is taking place, and it's also coming into means I never worked for the automotive domain, but after joining this side of the world as well, it is not less complex than the banks and the insurance companies. So.
Great. I picked up one point. You spoke about algorithms and data science. I want to kind of get into this discussion and I'm going to start with you again, Shilpa. And when it comes to fast-moving consumer goods, there are 2 sets of channels that we typically speak about. One is your mass retail, and one, of course, is your modern trade, and of course, e-com also does it. Now, I'm going to focus more on the ground level, the brick and mortar, which could be either modern trade or mass retail. How does this entire new age thing of data sciences and analytics work in your case? While you have a buying behavior pattern, while you have your sales figures and all that, but do you also overlay that with some first-hand consumer information when it comes to decoding the code? Okay, what does the consumer think before buying it, or why does he or she buy this particular product? And it's going to be very interesting to hear from you also, Samar, in your case, after Shilpa is done, that how do you kind of manage the 2 worlds together?
Yeah. So definitely the world of analytics that we see today is absolutely very overwhelming. And like we all are experiencing that, almost getting caught, drowned in that entire overwhelm and wave that has come through. It definitely is helping a lot in terms of the business, in terms of strategizing, the point of purchase, the retail plans, the pricing, so on and so forth. Which it is applicable to whichever industry that, we are into. Coming specifically to your point in terms of maybe a little touch point, or what we internally call it as the moment of truth, yeah? Because it's a personal care and FMCG category, this moment of truth becomes extremely important, which sometimes might get missed when you're looking at analytics data. Yeah, and that comes from this fundamental understanding of the consumer empathy. In the context or in the FMCG business that I am in, a small thing like so whenever we pick up, and each one of us does that, right? So whenever we pick up a product either in a modern trade or in a general retail, the first thing invariably we'll do is open and smell. Yeah, whichever product, so be it a soap, be it oil, be it any FMCG product, be it a lipstick, the first thing, lipstick is not supposed to be a deodorant, yeah, but we still will open and, you know, smell. And that is a moment of truth, and that is something which probably a big data might miss or analytics might miss, but this is where the inciting interpretation becomes very critical, and these are the points and the markers where we really are very particular, and it's important for us to you know, identify which are those moments of truth where the actual purchase decision happens, and that point of impulse is something which becomes a skill for you know, for a consumer scientist or for a data scientist, which kind of turns the purchase decision. Yeah.
Allow me to add a layer to my point to you. We all have been speaking about the end user, but there's also a channel in between. Who actually does the selling on your behalf, which could be typically a retailer, could be a platform, could be an e-commerce partner. In your business, Samar, typically the beer business, when I said that, okay, fine, how do you marry both the worlds? But is there a element of this retailer or a partner understanding his or her requirements, understanding what this kind of a partner is? Does that impact your business as well when it comes to consumer centricity, typically?
Enormously. So do you want me to answer that question first, or the...
Yeah.
So, so I'll just say one thing about what Shilpa said. What smell is something that marketers have not actually explored enough of. Have you ever wondered why coffee smells much better than it tastes? And tea tastes much better than it smells. United Airlines actually has coffee beans in their washrooms because it just smells brilliantly, right? Shiv will tell you that when you buy a new car, it needs to smell new. And I don't know whether they do it, but American car manufacturers actually spray perfume within the car. Leather has to smell the way it is, right? And your point of lipstick, when I buy clothes, I smell them. If I buy something new, I send it for a wash and then wear it. But when I'm buying it, I actually smell clothes as well. What's the smell? It needs to smell new. So that's one. There is a very high-end nightclub in Delhi called Bocha, B-O-C-H-A. If you walk in, and I actually complimented them when you walked in. There's this beautiful smell in the room. Walk into a lovely smelling airport terminal or a washroom. It predisposes your mind to a certain kind of experience. And unfortunately, in this country, the kind of smells that we get are very different. Yeah, so as a marketer, we've not explored that enough. So that's just my 2 bits on what Shilpa said. In terms of the question that Mudit asked, the role of what we call the CSM, the counter salesman, is huge in my business, because 90% of all alcohol purchase decisions are made as you're walking into the store. A little earlier in the morning, I talked about that 8 or 10 seconds is all I have to convert the consumer from category to brand. He walks in thinking of a beer, and he's thinking more than 1 or 2 consumers will buy Kingfisher. But at that point of time, my signage, my neon, the visibility, any offer that I have, maybe a collaboration with Jab Harry Met Sejal will help them buy more Heineken, etc. But those decisions are made there. And in alcohol, it's especially true because 9 out of 10 times your alcohol experience, the first time when you drank alcohol, was typically a friend told you, an uncle told you, if you're lucky, your dad or your mom told you have this, or someone you trusted. Your first experience is always with someone you trusted. That's how we all started drinking. Yaar, pee rahe yaar, tu bhi laga le. I'm telling you na, main bada bhai hu tera, tu le le. Now subconsciously, you're looking for that with the counter salesman as well. And it's very simple. I used to work for PepsiCo. Someone would walk in and say, Thanda dena. And now Thanda means anything. You can spend billions of dollars in advertising. One of the former chairman of Coke said that I need Coke to be at an arm's length, which is why the whole in-home program. But he said, Pepsi garam hai, Coke thanda hai, kaun sa do? You're dead. All your billions of advertising, unless you have a chilling infrastructure and it's available cold, the same problem. And you see, in our case, is 90% of all alcohol consumption is out of home. And you'll say, what? Really? I've got booze at home? Absolutely you do, but you represent 0.001% of the population. In India, it is still not considered acceptable to be drinking. to drink alcohol. Therefore, 90% of it is out of home, at a retail bar, or in the case of Bombay, in permit rooms, etc. Right? So there, the role of the counter salesman or the chap behind the counter, it says, Hayward's 5,000 nahi hai, knockout hai, chilled, kya do? Whether he has it or not is a different matter. And there is replaceability, especially when you're buying strong beer, you're drinking largely for alcohol, not for taste. So massive replacement. So the role of the counter salesman or a persuader who's there at the counter is enormous in our business, which is why we have very strong CSM incentive programs as well. In fact, in his business, and I'm guessing in his business as well, by the way, when we grew up, they were the definitive eponymous appliance brand in the country, and it's tremendous how they've reinvented themselves. I mean, you're buying a high-end car, you're putting out a large amount of money. The role of the retailer or your channel partner in recommending something is fabulous. I mean, it's really, really important. And to quickly answer your question on physical versus digital, I already told you about the physical world. At the moment, in my industry, it's easy because it's not allowed to sell in the digital space. However, there are delivery platforms like HipBar, Hipcask, Tallyho, MakeMyDrink.com, etc., which are sort of skirting with the law in some cases, and in some cases they've got permission. For instance, HipBar or Hipcask has permission in Tamil Nadu to actually book orders and deliver on the platform, and they're using that to make representations to Karnataka Excise. We're working with them to start off a similar platform. So at the moment, it is not allowed, but we do a lot of digital marketing and digital sort of messaging. But it's going to change. It will inevitably change, and we need to be prepared for that.
So from surrogate communication to direct communication, what changes do you see in consumer buying process, for the lack of a better word, when you talk about a offline world, which is the typical brick and mortar, and when you talk about the online world? Do you see a stark difference when you interact with, or when you notice their habits, when you notice their transaction histories, etc., etc.?
I think it's a huge change. It's again, I spoke about two things: traditional and a digital space. When it comes to purchase behavior or a pattern or the way they purchase, it's now what we're seeing is more digital. So we internally call it as a ROPO. Research online, purchase offline or online. That doesn't matter. But the research, the most part happens online. Any consumer products. I'm sure it's similar for the FMCG products as well. But this is the big change. When it comes to product, we have two set of consumers. And that going to coexist in a long run. Traditional and a digital consumer, but when it comes to purchase or a buying, behavior, the research part, the online part is big part, especially in FMCD, fast-moving consumer durables. So that's the biggest change, or the things the companies and organization has to accustom to, and try to create new ways and new kind of areas where they can go and attract this buyers.
Sure. Thanks. Shilpa spoke about while you have a lot of tools to kind of gauge what consumers or customers are buying at a particular point of sale, whether it's offline and online. I have now this point is very close to my heart. For the last 10 years or so, people have been saying, Mudit, you're a digital dinosaur. I said, okay, so be it. Because I'm a more of a human-centric, I believe in storytelling, and I believe in storytelling face-to-face rather than kind of, like you said, talking versus chatting. So I'm more of a talker and having a conversation. Do you think, and Shilpa, I'm taking a cue from what you just said, and I'm going to pass it on to Shiv. Shiv, do you think that with this advent of technology, with so many tools coming in, are we losing the human touch? As organization, or as brand and consumers, or as an organization, whichever way?
Sure. So I was just thinking while we were having the conversation, and I think you are the right person to have a discussion on it. So I'm facing a very, you can say that the contrasting era, for the better word. And imagine that we got a platform named M2 All. So M2 All is a platform where we sell cars and all the spare parts and some of the ABC stuff as well. So, and parallelly, like I'm also responsible to help the organization to increase the sales, having the, the channel partner, we call it. So imagine that here, when you have launched the platform, you have to have the conversion rates going up. However, still I'll say that the majority of the conversion, around 6 times conversion, I have at the physical store than selling cars on the online platform. So it may be the product because it is a high value product and you want to really experience the kind of the features and the facilities in it. However, before reaching to the physical stores, consumers adopts around 70% of the information at the website itself. So now it's where to invest money. Shall I empower the our physical stores, or shall I also empower the digital stores? So it is a time where we have to have a balance on it, and not only by just having the internet or the website can be good for each and every kind of product. However, if you ask me, I personally never visited a store to buy my AC, TV, or you name it. I never visited the store. And I got married after that, so I was lucky not to have the discussion on the color and all. So, means that still I'll say that the time still we have the time where we need the physical touch. And, when we sell the tractor, so imagine the buying in the tractor is not like somebody looked at the internet. They build a relationship with the farmer or the kind of consumer, and even it goes into the personal vehicle as well. And in the farm, what happens is that they give you the tractor before we do the financial transaction. So I'm just sharing with you off the discussion that it is relationship which is driving the sales there. However, still we will need, because the information has to, and as we talked about, the customer is empowered, so we have to pass the information. However, we will still be relevant at least in coming time, till the time robots, and I watched a movie named as Her, it's H-E-R, and I'm just watching a series named as Black Mirror, which is again on the artificial intelligence and machine learning, how it is changing our thinking process negatively or positively. But we will still be relevant into the physical world, and I'll still know Mudit as a person who recommended me a product.
Thank you, I exist. I have some future. So what I could make out from what the four of you shared your expert comments and views was that, one, irrespective of the platform, the consumer still is a warm body. Irrespective of the platform on how you communicate. People have been telling me, hey, let's do digital marketing, but I feel that it's marketing in a digital world. And you're marketing or you're communicating with the same person. So it's more about a seamless experience that you wish to create, whether he or she goes to your particular retail outlet to buy a beer, or goes to a pub to consume a beer, or I kind of, go and order a air conditioner online, or I go on to the King's Electronics or Chromas of the world to kind of, look at an air conditioner. So it's all about seamless experience, what happens over there. My last point that I want to kind of hear from each one of you quickly is, what is, maybe if you could summarize it quickly, and Shilpa, I'll come back to you before we make the house open for question answers. What in your view is going to happen, and what changes do you foresee in the next 2-3 years' time in the way the industry is growing across, in the way consumerism is happening, in the way people are talking about fickle-minded customers, in the way people are talking about using various tools to have a better connect with consumers? What is your outlook towards the future? If you could quickly summarize it.
One point I definitely feel is that brand loyalty might be transitory. So we have been, so at least we belong to a generation where we spoke about iconic brands. Yeah, and there are iconic brands in every category and industry, which probably might, kind of erode, perhaps. That is maybe one of the trends that happen. The second thing is maybe the entire agility in the entire business in terms of everything coming fast, going out fast. Yeah, that is one trend that I definitely foresee. And I think, and because it's going to be so fast, one of the things which I personally feel is consumers might be a little more forgiving because the next option is immediately available. Yeah, so in that sense, the engagement with the brand might become, since it's going to become transitionary, it might not be a very high emotional, so to say that, I was actually let down. That kind of feeling might not be there.
So what you're saying is that emotional quotient or emotional attachment to a particular brand may come down.
May come down, yeah.
May come down
Because it's
radically.
going to be a transitory experience, you know.
Yeah. KK, you have any differing views, or you kind of concur to what Shilpa said?
No, I think it's right that the emotional connect would come down, but and definitely because of they have so many options available at their doorstep, by click of a button. Definitely, they're not going to be as loyal as he spoke about when we were growing up, or even my father's, and there was only 2-3 brands to buy a fan, and they were loyal. And it's still those part of India where I see only 90% or almost 100% of the people are only about one brand. That will not change, but what she spoke about, that is a trend you need to cash upon. Understand that consumer, and you little while ago you spoke about not having that physical experience. Some people don't want it. Creating or using that opportunity to be relevant, in a fast. Be bold about what they want. Be transparent about what your organization or your company or your brand speaking to them, and what they want. And I think the biggest opportunity I see there is the co-creation. It used to be a one-way communication where the consumer were only receiving the information from the brand. But I think those days are gone. You can co-create so many things together, whether it is product, whether it is purchase experience, or whether it is communication about your products and understanding their feedback about your product. So it's I think it's a huge opportunity, and I see that becoming more and more and more relevant and fast upcoming next 2-3 years, relevant to your question.
So relevance is the key right now. So thank you so much, Shilpa, Shiv, Samar, KK, for your time. We just about have some minutes to have a couple of questions for the experts over here in case somebody would like to ask one. So we have around 4-5 minutes for squeezing in a couple of questions, please.
Yes, please.
So as per my understanding,
You want to give a mic to the gentleman?
hello, yeah. Hi, my name is Atul Khanna. I'm from the Aditya Birla Group. As per my understanding, consumer insights has two parts. One is, the data points, which is more on analytics, on predicting what will be the customer buying behavior, right? And the other part is the behavioral insights, what the customer is thinking. So it's actually more of a thought and a view. I would like to have your views. And referring to what Shilpa, you were saying, that we need to identify the moment of truth in the entire consumer journey, right from the point where the consumer has started thinking about the product. So there are two things. How do we balance both, which is the analytics part and the consumer behavior, and how do we take it to the last mile? Today, while in the boardrooms we are thinking, and a lot of analytics managers and product managers are thinking about it, but what is my last mile doing, which is the salesman on the field, or say customer experience guys at the stores, how they are listening and observing consumers and taking those insights back to the top so that we can stitch our strategy. And while identifying the moments of truth, on the lighter side, even in the beer industry, more what we see is that it is more of a choice rather than the decision that we go and make there. From a personal experience, whenever, and it's about the availability of the product. Many of the times it happens that, okay, I've started my journey from my home thinking that, okay, I'll buy, say, an elephant beer, but because of the availability, I end up, not buying anything and then selecting other spirit. So, that is again a moment of truth. So how do we stitch both, and how do we take it to the last mile so that we work it bottom up? Thank you.
Somebody would like to
I don't know who he wants to answer. Who's the question?
So actually it was between Shilpa and you, so more
You already
since...
established the rules, ladies first.
Yes, thanks for the question. Well, the balance is definitely needed, and that's what today we are at a risk of. So maybe analytics is fantastic. It is definitely has a very high impact in terms of our decision making. but a conscious effort to actually even look at this other aspect, which is your behavioral insights. That is something which becomes very critical, because sometimes for these kind, and I'm sure for these kind of, this area of insights, it really requires, so if you are a custodian of insights, yeah, it is really a hard job as a, from a stakeholder point of view of how you really establish that this part is also something that is required, yeah, because most of the time it is the other part which kind of takes over as far as the decisions are concerned. So the entire propagation and being an ambassador for this area is something I would kind of feel that, could set the tone.
You'd like to add something? Yes. Please.
I hope I've clarified. I mean, if there's anything, please.
I'm old school and proud of it, just like you. I never underestimate the power of emotions and memories. The thing about what we discussed earlier on about, so you will not be emotional about your first iPhone, but you will be emotional about your nani's besan ke laddu. Whenever I hear a koel, and I hear one in my house in Bangalore, I'm transported back to my nani's house. I'm 6 years old. Whenever I smell Kakeda's brain curry, I'm 7 years old and going to Shankar Market, Kakeda in Delhi with my grandfather. So those are the cues that determine behavior and ultimately influence purchase decisions in many categories. Not in high technology, not in consumer durables, for instance, perhaps, certainly not in laptops and mobile phones. But when you work in a category where you're putting something into your body, your first, and remember, people buy what's, in the alcohol business, people buy what's outside the bottle, not what's inside. All beers are good. Blind, you will not be able to differentiate between any of these beers. But there is a certain story that is told outside the bottle. What does Corona say? I mean, that is a classic, iconic. There are only 2 beer brands in the world, and please none of you report this back to my boss, otherwise I'll get sacked. There are only 2 iconic beer brands in the world, really, global brands. One is Corona, the other is Budweiser, for very different reasons. Corona is a single bottling plant in Mexico or Mexico, one single SKU. Now they have the Coronita, which is the smaller one. What do they say? Find your beach. That's it. Says it all, right? So the beach, sundowner, Corona, and a slice of lemon. There's a huge story behind slice of lemon. There's iconic advertising, consistent for the last 40 years. The other one is Budweiser. A slice of Americana, American baseball, apple pie, whatever. But it's that whole iconic thing. What is it people eat? The beers are the same, by the way. Brewmasters hate Budweiser, right? Because it's supposed to be a really watery beer. The problem is consumers love it. Yeah, the story behind the lime wedge in Corona is basically because it's in what's called a flint bottle, a clear glass bottle, a flint bottle, and they manufacture only one brewery and export it all over the world in different climates. It gets sun-struck. It gets damaged by the sun. So for instance, if you drink beer in Goa, very often it is because it's always outside, and most consumers can't tell. But the wedge of lime actually neutralizes the sun-struck beer taste. But they've, full credit to them, they've converted into a great marketing story. Corona without the lime. So never underestimate the power of emotion and storytelling in product categories that involve ingesting or perhaps even applying on your face. Colgate Dental Cream, CDC, Ramakrishna talked about that. It's practically the default choice of toothpaste for an entire generation of Indians. He talked about Crompton Greaves. Do you know why I used to work for PepsiCo? And do you know why in Europe the share of Coca-Cola is so dominant? In the UK, and until about 5 years ago when I was tracking it, Coke had an 86% market share and Pepsi was 14%. And this is largely the story through Europe. Do you know why? Because in the Second World War, when the Allied forces were advancing against the Axis forces, General Douglas MacArthur, then the supreme commander of the Allied forces, said, I want my troops to drink American Coca-Cola no matter which part of the world they're fighting in. So Coca-Cola Company put up bottling plants 70, 80 years ago to feed the American war machinery, and 3 generations of consumers grew up drinking Coca-Cola. So when PepsiCo entered 70, 80 years later, I mean, you're fighting a battle that will take a really long time to win. You know, conversely, in parts of the world where America is regarded as the great Satan, and I talked about geopolitical a little earlier in the day, you'll know I'm very politically incorrect, and you'll probably never, Goldwater will probably never invite me back again. But largely the Islamic world and the Middle East, where America is considered the great Satan, Pepsi dominates in market share because it is not as closely identified with Americana as Coca-Cola is. There's no right or wrong. I'm just saying the influences that determine brand success and brand loyalty. So yes, it is getting more and more transactional, but you will not remember the last time I dunzoed that thing. You will remember the last time I drank Kingfisher, I proposed to my girlfriend, I got kicked out of hostel, I had a fight with my father. So there are memories associated with alcohol. And you know, before I pass the mic back to Mudit, you're talking about the moment of truth. I'll tell you one humorous story. When I used to work for Spencer's, Rakshanda Khan, the famous television, or the well-known television actress, walked into one of our stores and asked one of the shop floor attendants, "Where's the loo?" He said, "1 minute, ma'am." And he goes and comes back, says, "Ma'am, we have Levi's and Lee. We don't have any loo." That was a moment of truth for her. He had no idea, because here's Rakshanda Khan walking into the Spencer store in Inorbit Mall, and the boy who is servicing her requirement lives in an 8x12 in Dharavi along with 10 other people. Story number one. The story number two is Ashish Vidyarthi, another actor who walked into our store and said, "I want to buy mushrooms," and this lady led him to the washroom. So, you know, your point earlier of, and you mentioned about physical versus, you know, when the rubber meets the road or touch point, obviously translated back to training needs. So we then subsequent, and Mihir would remember, he did a lot of recruitment for Spencer's. We went back and worked with Jet Airways, the people who trained the Jet Airways air hostesses, and trained, you know, got our people enrolled in a training program so that what you promised actually got delivered.
Thank you. So just to add to this, while people speak about the fast-moving consumer goods, what we intake and all that, but there's a lot of changes happening in the financial services space as well, and I represent that space for the last 14, 15 years. We will always remember our first credit card, our first bank account, our first bank which we visited, so that emotional quotient or that emotional connect will never go away. So with that, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for being a wonderful audience. Thank you, KK. Thank you, Samar, Shilpa, and Shiv for gracing the occasion. And wonderful to be a part of this panel. Thank you so very much.